Welcome to a holiday edition of Begley's Mailbag here on SNY.TV. I'm Ian Begley, SNY NBA Insider, and I'm answering your questions about the Knicks and the NBA. We're going to start off here with a question from the Knicks Recap. Knicks Recap wants to know about Jericho Sims. Where do the Knicks stand at this point regarding moving on from him? I think when you look at the Knicks and their trade position overall, you got to wonder about Mitchell Robinson's health, how he plays into it, whether they feel good about him coming back, whether they're not so sure. So I think that might affect their plans on Jericho Sims. I do know that in the offseason, they were talking to teams about getting second-round picks in return for Sims. Obviously, nothing came to fruition in the offseason. I do know that members of the Rockets are fans of Sims, so maybe that's a team to keep an eye on. But as far as potential trade of Sims, I think you have to keep an eye on Mitchell Robinson's potential return. And if they did make a move with Sims, I would assume, unless it's part of a multiplayer package, that you are going to get a draft compensation in return for Sims rather than a player. Got one from Be More Like State. Always an entertaining follow on Knicks Twitter. State wants to know, who are the Knicks trade targets? And if the Knicks continue to win, the Knicks only have Mitchell Robinson, Precious Achiuwa, and the second-round picks. They would also have campaign, and I believe Achiuwa can't be moved until January 15th because of his deal. Not 1,000% sure on that. But yeah, they have limited trade resources, State, as you point out. And so it'd be hard to swing a significant deal. They're also restricted by the second apron in trades. And so they have to match salary going out with salary coming in dollar for dollar. They cannot take any more salary on coming in that they have going out. So that makes it tricky to swing a deal. As far as potential targets, I'll lean back again on Mitchell Robinson's health and what the Knicks read on it is. I do think that's going to be one of the biggest factors as you head into trade season. Do they think Mitch can come back and contribute and play at a high level? Yes, then I think they just continue to wait for Mitchell Robinson to come back. If they have serious concerns, I would expect them to then at least take a look at the trade market, and then you look at the bigs that they had interest in over the summer. Names like Jonas Valanciunas, Goga Bitadze, Nick Richards. I would also throw, depending on what happens in Portland, DeAndre Ayton in there, Robert Williams III in there, just because those are guys who might be available, bigs who might be available if the Knicks don't feel like Mitchell Robinson can make it all the way back. So those are the names that I would keep an eye on. Also, the Knicks in the past have had interest in Bruce Brown. Brown, injured currently, expiring contract out in Toronto. I would assume that they at least take calls, the Raptors, on Brown. So maybe that's a situation to keep an eye on. Although, with Landry Shamet coming on, I don't see room, right, for a player to come in and get a rotation spot unless you're sending out multiple rotation players. So the Knicks facing restrictions via trade, don't have a ton of assets, and I do think you're looking at Mitchell Robinson as one of the hurdles here, or linchpins, if you will. His health, what do the Knicks think? Is he coming back? Can he not make it all the way back? Got one here from Anytime Knicks. Anytime wants to know, the Knicks need a wing, in his opinion. Is there a chance that Chuma Okeke or TJ Warren come up to the main roster? Chuma and TJ playing well with the Westchester Knicks, the Knicks G League club. TJ Warren in particular putting up big numbers. And so when you look at this Knick roster, their payroll, obviously they can't go over that second apron. I believe they're currently somewhere around $500,000 below that second apron. And so it's tricky to add salary at the moment, but you look at going ahead to March 2nd, I believe the date is when I believe that they can have some wiggle room with the salary, and then they might be able to add a player after the trade deadline in early March. You're talking about, buyout market, things of that nature, and maybe that at that point they could add a player like a Warren or an Okeke. But you look at the years of service, right, for these players, and I'm not exactly sure the math, but the more years of service you have, the bigger your minimum salary is. So that's something that the Knicks would have to, obviously factor into any of these signings. So a player like Okeke has a smaller number than a player like Warren when you're looking at those veteran minimum deals. Got one from the boss, Robert Cross. Robert wants to know, looking ahead, do you believe Money Mitch is on the Knicks after the trade deadline? And this is something that's going to be a big topic here. Robert talked about it a little bit earlier. If I had to guess, right, I would guess that the rehab gets to a point where the Knicks can make an educated decision on Mitchell Robinson, and I would guess that he will be here because the rehab continues to go well, and he shows he's at a point where the Knicks know that he can come back and play at a high level. If I had to guess, I would guess he gets to that point, and the Knicks are confident moving forward with him. Obviously, the rehab's going slowly, or the Knicks have medical information that leads them to believe that Robinson would not be able to come back at a high level, then it's a different story. Then I think they would move on and trade Mitchell Robinson because they're in win now mode. They can't really afford to have such a vacancy at such an important role on this team at the backup center spot. So that's how I look at it. Interesting thing to me is once again at the trade deadline, some teams have been inquiring about Robinson's health status, wanting to know how he's doing, when's he going to get back on the court, what's the injury looking like. And so that tells me at the very least teams are wanting to do their homework on Mitchell Robinson if he does become available. But again, it's the unknown with Mitchell Robinson. It's the injury status, it's the rehab, and it's if he can get to a point where the Knicks or another team feels like he can get healthy and contribute day in, day out at a high level. Got one from Thomas, Montana. He references my buddy Steph Bondy from the New York Post. He says, Bondy made a comment on Dante returning in the future. What would a trade for Dante look like? When would you expect it to happen? This year, next year? One thing on Dante, the Knicks cannot trade for him within the course of this season. If you trade away a player, there's a 1-year moratorium on bringing him back via trade. So that's the timeline you're looking at a potential Dante trade. I also don't think Minnesota, they really wanted Dante DiVincenzo in this deal, right? In the deal that sent Karl Towns to New York, sent Julius Randle to Minnesota. Dante was a key piece. So I would just assume that Minnesota does not want to move on from Dante. They want Dante to thrive there in Minnesota. They want him to help them win games. And so I would assume they're patient there with Dante as he continues to try to figure it out. And I think he ultimately will. And he'll be a big contributor for the T-Wolves. And then, where are you at that 1-year anniversary mark? Is Dante a player who Minnesota definitely would not trade at that point? Or is he still not playing well? Maybe they look to move him. I think that's how you would answer the question in terms of trade value, just because there's so many unknowns there. Let's say Dante is playing well. Trade value is obviously higher. Would have, I believe, 2 years left on his deal, so it's not like he's an expiring contract. So Minnesota at that point could hold a pretty high asking price for DiVincenzo, particularly if they're talking to the Knicks, because they would know the Knicks would be very interested in bringing him back. So I think there's a lot of basketball to be played before you could talk about DiVincenzo being moved and what his trade value might be, because you do have that 1-year restriction on the Knicks trading for DiVincenzo. One note on DiVincenzo and the T-Wolves, it's a minor thing, but the Knicks really beat them handily in Minnesota earlier this month. Karl Towns having a really big game up there, and I heard the film session the next day for the Timberwolves. There was some strong emotions, players upset, players including DiVincenzo and ex-Knick Julius Randle upset in that film session with, I would only assume, what happened in that game the night before, maybe general themes. And it was there was some emotion during that film session. So let's see where Minnesota takes it from there, if they can get things straightened out or if they continue to kind of flounder as you get closer to the trade deadline. Got a question here from Big Frank, 1979. Big Frank wants to know, any chance the Knicks trade for a defensive guy like Herb Jones? I don't think that the Knicks can really meet what New Orleans' asking price will be for a guy like Herb Jones. Obviously, young, talented player. A lot of things in flux in New Orleans. We had reported that, top members of the organization were upset with the idea that Dyson Daniels was included in that trade that got them DeJounte Murray. Daniels obviously having a big year in Atlanta. So some things under the hood there in New Orleans going on that I just don't know how to read. But with Herb Jones specifically, the Knicks, there's trade restrictions that they face because they're in the first apron. They don't have firsts value to give up right now. They have a lot of seconds, but I would assume that they couldn't meet the asking price that New Orleans would hold for a player like Jones. That'll do it for us on this edition of Begley's Mailbag. I want to wish everyone happy holidays, happy New Year, and we will see you back in early January talking Knicks, trade chatter, and the rest of the NBA. Look forward to seeing you then.